Okay, raise your hand if either you and or someone you know pays taxes. Okay, good. I should see every single one of your hands up in the air right now. Because if you go to a fast food restaurant or to a store and you buy something, you pay taxes on that. It's called the sales tax. And if you own a home or your parents own a home, they pay taxes on that too. It's called the property tax. And if you have a job or your friend has a job, you pay taxes on your wages. It's called an income tax. Taxes are one of the ways in which our government pays for all of its spending. And if you haven't noticed, our economy is kind of in a crisis right now. So whoever wins this upcoming presidential election is going to determine the fate of our country. And as we all noticed in the presidential debates, that is, if you watch them, President Obama accused Mitt Romney's tax plan of including a $5 trillion tax hike on the middle class. And then Mitt Romney would refute that claim without ever really going into the nitty-gritty details of his tax plan. Therefore, in my speech, I'll inform you about the economics behind Mitt Romney's tax plan. First, I'll cover the tax cuts in his plan. Then I'll go over some of the spending cuts he'll enact. And lastly, I'll cover his plans with regards to capital gains. So the first tax he plans to eliminate is the death tax. However, you might notice by a different name, like the federal estate tax. And what this tax does is it taxes the accumulated wealth of Americans that they've already paid taxes on throughout their entire working lives. According to Mitt Romney's official website, what this tax does, it creates a series of perverse incentives that create the most complicated and convoluted tax avoidance schemes at tremendous cost to everyone involved. He also states that this tax can create or have catastrophic effects on small family-owned businesses because in the process of passing it on to the next generation, it can create tax liabilities that they can't meet without breaking up the business itself. So he wants to eliminate this tax. He also wants to reduce individual tax rates across the board by 20%. According to Alex Brill, who was the former director and head economist for the Ways and Means Committee, the current tax rates are 10, 15, 25, 28, 33, and 35%. And after his 20% deductions, the new rates would be 8, 12, 20, 22.4, 26.4, and 28%. And what this means is you'll be paying less money in taxes, and therefore you'll have more money in your pockets to spend on whatever you need it for or whatever you want. But besides just cutting individual tax rates, Mitt Romney also plans on reducing the corporate tax rate from 35% to 25%. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, our corporate tax rate is one of the highest in the entire developed world, which causes our businesses to be less competitive in the world market, as well as it encourages outsourcing of our businesses with the hesitation of bringing back their profits to the United States, where they have to pay the difference of the two tax rates to our government. So to make this a little easier to understand, Alex Brill, who previously qualified, and Alan Bedard, who was a worker for the U.S. Treasury Department's Office on Tax Analysis, explained in the article the benefits and limitations of tax reform. They explained it in terms of apples and oranges. Now let's say that there's a 40% tax rate on oranges, while you get a deduction for apples. You'd be more likely to go for the apple because it's financially beneficial for you. However, after Mitt Romney changes up the corporate tax rate to 25% instead of 35%, the new rate, it's just like you bringing down the tax rate on oranges from 40% to 20%, while simultaneously changing the apples instead of a deduction, you'd get a 20% tax rate as well. So the market would no longer be which one's financially beneficial, but which one do I actually prefer, the apple or the orange. So I hope that helps. I know it helped me, but everyone's different. Instead of just changing individual tax rate and the corporate tax rate, he also plans on cutting federal spending. One thing that his website states that he plans on cutting is pork barrel spending and earmarking. And what this is this happens when legislators allocate a certain amount of money to a certain district, which tends to be their own. And it's basically like a publicity statement to their constituents, in which they fund projects like the Big Dig, or a more commonly known one, the Bridge to Nowhere. And what they're trying to accomplish is they're trying to be seen as someone who brings the money to their district, so that they can be voted back into office. He also states that he plans on cutting federal spending for Amtrak completely. And what Amtrak is it's a transportation network that goes across the United States. According to Paul Berdard, who is a writer for the U.S. News and World Report, he also is planning on cutting federal spending for the National Endowment of the Arts and Humanities, as well as cutting federal subsidies for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds TV networks like PBS. That's where your Big Bird comes in, as well as other radio stations. So he also states that Mitt Romney is planning on cutting federal workers' compensations by about 30 to 40%, so that they're more reflective of their private sector counterparts. And so these are some of the government spending cuts that Mitt Romney is planning, but I don't have enough time to go over all of them, so there's more. You can check them out at its website. But he also wants to make some changes with regards to capital gains. Now, so you can understand this a little more, you need to know what falls under the category of capital gains. Collectibles, real estate, small business stock, as well as business assets all fall under the category of capital gains. But these two can be separated into two different types, short-term and long-term. Short-term capital gains are capital assets that you hold on to for a year or less before you sell them. These are currently taxed at the same rate as your income tax, whereas long-term capital gains are obviously capital assets that you hold on to for more than a year, and these are taxed at a 50% rate. These rates were set up by the Bush administration's tax cuts of 2001 and 2003. However, they were set to expire in 2010, but President Obama signed them into action for another 2 years. So they're set to expire in January 2013. But what Mitt Romney wants to do with them is he wants to eliminate the tax on capital gains, dividends, and interest for taxpayers that earn an adjusted gross income of less than $200,000, as well as keeping the current low rates for everyone else, instead of letting them skyrocket to the high 30 percentile range like they're supposed to do in January. So now that you know a little more about what Mitt Romney is planning on doing with regards to tax cuts, government spending cuts, as well as capital gains, you can make a more intelligible vote in the presidential election that's coming up on November 6th, which will undoubtedly affect your future. Thank you.